Welcome back. Speaker Johnson this morning, just moments ago, said we have a plan after the slimmed-down version of the original spending bill to avoid a government shutdown failed in the House last night. So we're getting breaking news right now. We could actually see a turn here. This new plan, reportedly a temporary fix that will be voted on at 10 a.m. this morning. So this is a very fast-moving situation. Markets will likely react. My next guest predicted all of this on Capitol Hill, this drama, back in February in a Wall Street Journal op-ed. Former World Bank President David Malpass wrote this: whoever is inaugurated next January will face a perfect storm. The suspension of the debt limit expires January 1, threatening another bad deal to avoid default and kick the can into 2025, forcing a budget battle that only the swamp could enjoy. I spoke with the former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, on Sunday Morning Futures earlier this month about this funding fight as well. Here's what he said.
Right now, it doesn't look like they're going to finish this year's funding, and they're going to push that into next year's funding. So what that means is you're putting more burden on President Trump. So that means government funding they never got done this year, and they got to get that done by next March. Well, if they're worried on that, that delays everything else. Not doing the border and the tax doesn't delay anything. It's that funding. The plan I had is you got the funding done, and you could actually do the debt ceiling now, too, to truly give President Trump a honeymoon.
Joining me now, the man himself, former World Bank President, Purdue University Distinguished Fellow, and Wall Street Journal contributor, David Malpass. David, you definitely called it back before the election about this drama. Tell us how you see things.
Hi, Maria. There is the need for a full upheaval. If you think of what Trump won the election on, it's the idea of new ideas and new ways to do things. And there was, to an extent, a setup going on where he was going to have to find a way to raise the debt limit on his own watch. He called that out on Wednesday, saying, look, this is Biden's debt. He needs to raise the limit. But the Senate is still controlled by Democrats. So I think one thing is to just try to get out of this year into next year and then have a clean slate. I wouldn't call it a honeymoon. That's what you were saying there. It's going to be a chaotic environment. To an extent, what we're seeing right now is a mini Doge. If you think what Doge is trying to do, it's to turn over, it's to have an upheaval in the way we do government spending and government power. Right now, it's all set up for the lobbyists in Washington. It's the elite against the rest of the country. So that's what Doge is about. And in a way, we're playing out a short run this week very fast in getting out of that mess. Yeah.
Well, look, if they can't agree and they can't support President Trump's agenda today, what does it look like once he's in power? You know, I mean, look, the Democrats are going to push back on President Trump's agenda any way they can.
That's right. And so the Senate is doing that as long as Schumer holds on power, so another week or so. And then there will be a new environment in January and an ability to negotiate the spending. I have to say there's a bigger issue going on, which is worldwide to an extent, which is socialism versus the people. Under socialism, the government controls things. The public is voting in country after country to say that they want the people to control things. And so you're seeing that in the elections across Europe and Canada. And so that's going to give a different environment in 2025. But we have to go through this period where the bills that were already written, the traps that were already set, have to be abolished or undone. I think we do need, one thing, Maria, in the U.S., we need to think about what is the limit on the size of government. Wouldn't it be amazing if Elon Musk came out and said, you know, there's a gap in our current laws. We don't really have a way to control Washington. And so let's sit down and figure out a way to have limits on the size of government. That would be a rewrite of the debt limit that would make it not so harmful.
Yeah, and you make a great point in terms of what's going on in Europe. There is a conservative thread raging throughout Europe right now, which I think is really interesting. But let me stay on Canada for a second, because Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau expected to reshuffle his cabinet today. He's facing growing calls to resign after the abrupt departure of his finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, earlier this week. Trump is still threatening a 25% tariff on all Canadian imports. Then there's UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer also saying he's not a fan of tariffs in a signal to Trump, tapping a trade veteran as the UK ambassador to the United States. This is a Tony Blair acolyte. Trump told the European Union in a Truth Social post earlier this morning it must reduce its trade gap with the United States through large-scale oil and gas purchases or face tariffs. What do you make of Trump's tweet to the EU, buy more oil or else?
The negotiation is on. You know, the world trading system is broken. And so the U.S. is standing up saying this doesn't work for us. I was in a lot of meetings with Trudeau and with Chrystia Freeland and with others, and they're approaching the world from a different spot. The new UK ambassador announced to the U.S. is you called him a trade expert, which is right, but it's from the standpoint of he was anti-Brexit. That means favor of the European Union, which is socialism. And so you've got to have a foundational discussion with Europe, with Canada, and really with the world of saying, how is the U.S. going to interact with you when you have higher tariffs in many cases than we do? That needs to be the foundation of the negotiation from the standpoint of, let's call it reciprocity, meaning we're all looking to have more and more profitable and more beneficial commerce. So let's figure out how we do it, but it's not the current system. So I think it's one part. We haven't talked about the Fed. You know, in each case, the models that Trump is inheriting from the past were ones that were big government models. And so as we think about how to get interest rates down and benefits for the people around the country, there needs to be a new thinking about how it all works. Inflation is not caused inflation is caused by not enough production. So the solution is to get the regulatory policies improved, the financial regulations on banking improved so that we can get more output. That's the key right now.
Yeah, no, I understand. Wow, there is a lot going on, and we will follow it. Thanks very much for walking us through all of that. The 10-year, by the way, is down this morning, 2 basis points right now. David, it's good to see you. Thank you so much. We'll watch that and